Viewer discretion advised. This content contains disturbing real-life accounts, intense suspense, and descriptions of violence. It may be unsuitable for viewers under 18 or those sensitive to frightening content. If either applies to you, please do not watch. The road always knows. There's a moment, most drivers have felt it at least once, when the road ahead stops feeling like just asphalt and starts feeling like something watching you back. You know the feeling. It's 2 a.m., the highway is black and empty. The only light in the world is your own headlights cutting a narrow cone through the dark. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a small voice whispers, "Something is wrong out here." Most of us shake it off. We turn up the radio, we grip the wheel a little tighter, and we keep driving. Because what else is there to do? The destination is still miles away, and the gas isn't going to pump itself. But sometimes that feeling is right. Sometimes the road doesn't just feel like it's watching you. It actually is. And what's hiding out there in the dark beyond the tree line, beyond the guardrail, beyond the next curve, is something you were never meant to see. The 3 stories in this book are real. They happen to real people on real American roads. The names and certain identifying details have been changed to protect the people involved, but the events themselves are as true as the asphalt. Those people were standing on when everything went wrong. Read them alone if you want the full effect. Read them at night if you're the type who likes to test themselves. But we do ask one thing. The next time you're driving down a dark road and that small voice in the back of your mind starts whispering, listen to it, because sometimes the road already knows what's out there. And sometimes all it's trying to do is warn you. The clearing. It was 11:47 p.m. when Jamie pulled off Route 9 and into the crops, and it was exactly 11:47 p.m. when everything in the night changed. Let me back up. The 4 of them had been friends since high school: Jamie, Marcus, Reese, and Callie. The kind of friendship that survives bad haircuts, bad decisions, and too many nights that started well and ended badly. On this particular Friday, one of those nights was already well underway. There had been a party at a house out near the edge of Harlan County, the kind of gathering that always starts out small and polite and somehow becomes 30 people and a bonfire by midnight. Marcus had organized it. Reese had enthusiastically attended every part of it. Callie had been the most ambitious about the bar cart in the kitchen, and Jamie had made the responsible call and stayed sober for the drive home. Living in rural Kentucky means making certain sacrifices for your social life. You want to go out? Great. Expect a 40-minute drive each way on roads that were built before most people in town were born. Route 9, specifically, was the kind of road that the county seemed to have forgotten existed. No streetlights, no center markings, just 2 lanes of cracked asphalt cutting through a corridor of old-growth trees and the occasional farmhouse, set back far enough that you couldn't see its windows from the road. Jamie had driven it hundreds of times, still didn't love it at night. "I have to stop," Callie announced from the back seat. Her voice had that specific texture of someone who was absolutely serious despite sounding anything but. "We're 20 minutes out," Jamie said. "Jamie, I have to stop now." Marcus, in the passenger seat, was already laughing. Reese, wedged between Callie and the opposite door, had his head back and his eyes closed, somewhere between awake and not. "There's literally nowhere to stop," Jamie said. It's all corn. It's all corn and trees." "The corn will do fine," Callie said. Jamie exhaled through the nose, slowed the car, pulled onto the narrow dirt shoulder and cut the engine. Ahead of them, the road dissolved into blackness. Behind them, the same. The headlights threw long, pale rectangles across the vegetation on either side. Callie was out of the car before it had fully stopped moving. "Don't go far," Jamie called after her. She disappeared into the tall stalks on the right side of the road, and the crops closed behind her like a curtain. Jamie sat in the driver's seat for a moment, counted, got to 30, realized they also needed to go and stepped out, crossing to the opposite side of the road and stepping a few feet into the tree line. The kind of person who needs darkness and privacy for this sort of thing. A character flaw, maybe, but a deeply held one. The woods were loud with night sound, crickets, the dry rustle of leaves. Somewhere distant, an owl that seemed deeply committed to its profession. Jamie was back in the car in under 2 minutes. Reese hadn't moved. Marcus was scrolling his phone. The radio was playing something indeterminate and slightly too loud for 11:47 on a road that had never heard of a noise ordinance. 5 minutes passed. Callie had not come back. "She's probably fine," Marcus said, but he said it the way people say things when they are beginning to suspect they are not, in fact, true. "Callie!" Jamie called through the open window. Nothing, just the crops and the night. Jamie got out, walked to the edge of the field where Callie had disappeared. The stalks were dense and close together, taller than a person, leaves brushing against each other in the slight breeze. In daylight, this would be picturesque. At midnight, on a road with no lights, it was something else entirely. "Marcus, come with me." Marcus did not argue, which told Jamie he was more worried than he was letting on. Reese was left in the car. He was, at this point, not a useful participant in any event requiring conscious decision-making. Jamie grabbed the small flashlight from the glove box, one of those compact LED ones, barely bigger than a marker, and the two of them pushed into the field. The crops swallowed them immediately. 3 steps in, and the car was invisible behind them. The flashlight lit a cone of about 8 feet. Beyond that, just stalks and more stalks, and the sound of their own feet moving through the rows. "Callie," Marcus called. He had a loud voice when he used it, the kind that carries. It should have been impossible for her not to hear. No answer. Marcus was starting to find something darkly funny about this. Jamie could hear the suppressed laughter in his voice when he called her name again. But Jamie was not laughing. Something felt off. The kind of off that has no logical explanation and doesn't need one, because it's not coming from your brain. It's coming from somewhere lower and more honest. They walked straight, the only real option in a crop field in the dark, for what felt like 2 or 3 minutes. And then Jamie's flashlight swept across an unexpected gap in the rows. A narrow clearing, maybe 5 or 6 feet wide, running perpendicular. A maintenance path, probably. Something for equipment to move through. They stopped at the edge of it. Jamie swept the light left. Empty path, dissolving into darkness. Swept it right, and there was someone standing in it. Not Callie, a man, standing at the edge of the flashlight's reach, not moving, just standing there in the maintenance path between the rows, at midnight, in a field that did not belong anywhere near the word normal. Jamie's brain did the thing brains do in these moments, which is to try to construct a reasonable explanation. A farmer, a neighbor, someone else who pulled off the road. But none of those explanations got past the first obstacle, which was the man's expression. Or more accurately, the complete absence of one. He wasn't startled, he wasn't confused, he was just watching, patient in a way that felt deeply wrong, like patience that had been practiced for a long time, and for reasons that had nothing to do with anything good. Jamie ran. There was no decision made. The body simply turned and moved. Stalks hit face and arms and were ignored. Feet found the ground and kept finding it. The car materialized out of the dark in what felt like 10 seconds, though it was probably longer. Reese was passed out in the back. Jamie leaned on the horn. The sound split the night open, held, released, held again. Marcus came out of the crops first, panting, a look on his face that had nothing funny left in it. He was dragging Callie by the arm, and Callie was not walking on her own. She was conscious, barely, sagging against him like something had taken the structural integrity out of her legs. They got her into the back seat. Jamie was already behind the wheel. It was Marcus who noticed it first, tilting the dome light to see better. A dark gash across Callie's right temple, jagged and still seeping. The kind of wound that comes from something heavy and sharp meeting a person's head at speed. "Drive," Marcus said. The laughter was completely gone from his voice now, gone like it had never been there. "Hospital, now." The nearest emergency room was 11 minutes away. Jamie made it in 8. It was in the waiting room, sitting under fluorescent lights while a nurse cleaned and sutured Callie's wound, that Marcus finally told Jamie what he had seen. Not in the car. He'd been unable to say it in the car. He said it quietly, leaning forward, elbows on knees, not quite able to make eye contact. He had found Callie on the ground, not standing, and before he'd reached her, just a few seconds before the horn, he had seen a figure crouched over her in the dark. Not beside her, over her, a man leaning down. And when the horn sounded, the figure had straightened, turned toward the sound, and then moved deeper into the field, unhurried, like something that had been interrupted but was not afraid. The man from the path. Callie spent 2 days in the hospital. She had no memory of the field, no memory of the car, the party, or most of that evening. The last thing she could recall with any clarity was standing in someone's kitchen at the party, laughing at something Marcus had said. Everything after that was just black. The clearing. The police were called, of course. A report was filed. 2 officers drove out to Route 9 that same night and walked the field with proper flashlights and proper backup, and they found exactly what you'd expect to find in a cornfield at 1 a.m. Rows of corn, some disturbed ground, and one area near the maintenance path where the soil was scuffed and pressed in ways consistent with, as the report would later put it, possible recent activity. No person, no weapon, no evidence that would make a prosecutor feel confident. The case stayed open for a while. Then it went quiet. Jamie still drives Route 9 sometimes, still takes the same roads home. What choice is there, really? The geography doesn't change just because something happened on it. But there's a particular stretch of that road, right where the shoulder widens slightly before the first stand of old oaks, where Jamie's hands tighten on the wheel every single time. Even in daylight, even with music playing and the windows down and every rational part of the brain insisting that it was one night and it's over. The body remembers differently. The body was there, in that field, with that flashlight, when the beam caught those standing legs in the maintenance path. The body knows something the brain keeps trying to argue away. Callie recovered fully, physically. The scar faded. She went back to the same parties, drove the same roads, laughed the same laugh at Marcus's terrible jokes. But Jamie noticed in the months after that Callie never volunteered to be the last one out of anywhere. She was always the first one back to the car. Always. Neither of them ever talked about why. There's something particular about rural roads at night that no amount of description fully captures. You can talk about the darkness, the isolation, the way sound behaves differently when there are no buildings to reflect it back at you. But what's harder to articulate is the scale of it. The feeling of being a very small object moving through a very large emptiness. City dwellers talk about feeling anonymous in crowds, but that's a known anonymity. You're invisible because there are too many people to see you. Rural anonymity at night is different. You're invisible because there is no one. not for miles, not in any direction. And anything that happens to you out there happens in a kind of absolute privacy that cities simply cannot offer. The person who stood in that maintenance path knew this, counted on it, probably. What was he doing out there? The honest answer is that no one knows and may never know. The optimistic interpretation is that he was a landowner, trespassed upon, who responded in the worst possible way to the presence of strangers in his field. The less optimistic interpretation is something none of the people involved, Jamie, Marcus, Reese, Callie, have been willing to say out loud in each other's company even years later. Some things are better left at the edge of the flashlight's reach. Uniform, she had done this drive 100 times, and she would do it 100 more. That was what she told herself at 12:17 a.m. as she turned onto Route 17 and watched the last gas station disappear in her rearview mirror. Nora worked nights at a 24-hour pharmacy on the eastern edge of town, the kind of place that smelled of antiseptic and floor polish and kept its fluorescent lights burning at full intensity, regardless of what the sun was doing outside. She'd been there 4 years. Night shift suited her. She was a night-oriented person in a world built for morning people, and the pharmacy asked nothing of her before 10 p.m., which was a more reasonable accommodation than most employers were willing to make. Route 17 was the fastest way home. Not the most populated. That honor went to the interstate with its rest stops and semi-trucks and the particular comfort of knowing that other people were awake and moving. Route 17 was quieter, unlit for long stretches, winding through a band of second-growth forest before opening into the suburbs where Nora's apartment building sat. On summer nights, she sometimes rolled the windows down for the smell of the trees. On winter nights, she drove it fast and watched for deer. This was October, cool enough for the windows to stay up, late enough for traffic to be essentially non-existent. The road curved gently ahead of her, lit only by her own headlights. She had the radio on low, something instrumental she wasn't really listening to. The cones appeared around a bend, a row of them, maybe a dozen, stretching across the right lane in a tidy diagonal. Reflective orange tape. A blue emergency light blinking on a sawhorse to the right of the setup. And standing just past the cones, facing her car, a person in a reflective safety vest with a police uniform visible underneath. Nora's first thought was, checkpoint. She'd seen them before. DUI checkpoints, license checks, the kind of thing law enforcement ran on weekend nights on roads people used to get home from bars. She eased off the gas, came to a stop with her front bumper a few feet short of the cone line. The figure in the vest approached her car. Walked slowly, unhurried, hands visible. She watched in the outside mirror and then looked forward as he reached her window. She put it down. He was younger than she expected, mid-20s maybe, tall. She noticed this immediately, the way the top of the window frame barely cleared his chest, lean, with close-cropped hair and a small earring catching the blue light from the sawhorse. His expression was neutral, not the practiced professional neutrality of someone trained in it. Something softer, something that, looking back, Nora would describe as studied, like someone who had watched how officers interacted with drivers and was doing their best impression. "License and registration, please," he said. His voice was low, very low. Nora reached for her bag, then stopped. Something was wrong. She couldn't name it immediately, but the wrongness had a texture, specific and growing, like a sound just below the threshold of hearing that you feel before you hear it. "Was I doing something wrong?" she asked. "I wasn't speeding." He looked at her steadily. Then slightly to his left, not at anything in particular, just away, and back. "Ma'am, this is a sobriety checkpoint." "Okay," she said slowly. But why would you need my ID and registration before testing me? That's not— You'd ask for those after if I failed. A pause. Longer than a professional pause. The kind of pause that happens when someone is recalibrating. Please step out of the vehicle, he said. Nora's hand was already finding the door handle because in the moment the request feels automatic. You're taught to comply, taught that compliance is safety, taught that the uniform means authority. She was already stepping out before the second part of her brain caught up to the first, and the second part of her brain had a question. Where is his patrol car? She looked past him, over his shoulder. The blue light on the sawhorse was the only light source. Behind it, half obscured in the tree shadows off the shoulder, sat a small sedan. Old, civilian, nothing on the roof, no markings on the doors. Her feet were on the asphalt. She was standing. He had pulled a roll of white tape from his vest pocket and was crouching to lay it against the ground. A sobriety walk line, she recognized it, a standard field test. He stretched it out about 15 feet, stood, gestured for her to step to one end. She walked the line. Her mind was doing calculations now, rapid and quiet, the kind of thinking that happens below the level of speech. He walked directly behind her. Too close, uncomfortably close, the way people who don't care about your personal space will stand when they have decided that your space is not yours to control. When she reached the end of the line and turned, she could see the blue light more clearly. It was sitting on the hood of the sedan. Not a department vehicle, not any official vehicle she'd ever seen. "Can I see your badge?" she said. He looked at her. Just looked. No hand going toward a badge wallet. No explanation. Just that long, still look. And Nora understood. The way you understand something that your body has known for 30 seconds while your brain was still negotiating with itself. "I'll go get it," he said, finally. Quiet. And he walked back toward the sedan. The instant he turned away, Nora was back in her car. She didn't run. Running would have been conspicuous, would have cost her the seconds she needed. She walked quickly, got in, locked the door, started the engine in one practiced motion. She pulled forward through the cone line. The cones skittered and bounced off her bumper, and accelerated. She saw his headlights come on in her mirror when she was already 200 feet away. She had the speedometer at 60 before she reached the next quarter mile. The headlights stayed behind her for a moment, long enough to make her stomach drop. And then the next curve took her out of sight. She drove for 3 more miles with her heart in her throat. Got off at the interchange, pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner, left the engine running, and sat shaking for several minutes while the orange neon sign above the door buzzed its indifferent light across her dashboard. Inside, a man at the counter was eating pie. Normal. Absurdly, impossibly normal. Nora called the county sheriff's department from the parking lot. She reported what she'd seen, described the sedan as best she could, gave them the approximate location on Route 17. The dispatcher was professional and courteous. A unit would check it out. Did she need anyone to stay on the line? No, she said. She was fine, she was fine. She drove home by a different route that night, and for the next 6 weeks after that. She never heard whether they found the sedan or the man who had been standing in the road. She never heard anything at all, which in some ways was worse than a bad outcome. At least a bad outcome would have been information. Silence just meant it was still out there. She still has the dash cam she bought 3 days later, uses it to this day. And every time she drives a stretch of empty road at night, she notices the same thing. How easy it would be, with a handful of traffic cones and a blue light from a hardware store, to make someone stop. How completely a uniform, real or approximate, can override the instinct that's screaming at you to keep moving. We are trained, most of us, to stop for lights and vests and authority. It is a good instinct, on balance. Most of the time, but not all of the time. Not on a curve in the forest at 12:17 in the morning, with a sedan in the tree shadows and a man who won't show you his badge. The Jeep without a roof. The gas gauge had been lying to him for months, and Trevor knew it. He just kept choosing to believe it anyway, the way you believe a thing, because the alternative is inconvenient. He was driving from Portland, Maine, to stay with family in upstate New York, a trip he'd made before, though not usually alone and not usually starting this late. He'd wrapped up work around 5:30 and figured he'd rather drive through the evening and arrive late than take a day off and do it properly. A classic Trevor decision, his sister would later say. 100% a Trevor decision. The Jeep was old but reliable. Soft top, currently folded back because it was one of those early September evenings where the temperature sits at exactly the right point. Not hot enough to need air conditioning, not cool enough to want a roof. The dashboard lights glowed amber and green in the dark. He had a playlist going, something he'd built for long drives, and he was somewhere in central Vermont when the beeping started. Low fuel, the orange light, then the alarm. Trevor checked the gauge. The needle was sitting on what it always sat on, a number that bore no particular relationship to reality, given that the sending unit in the tank had been malfunctioning for 2 years. His brother had borrowed the Jeep the day before and sworn, hand to heart, that he'd filled it. But his brother had a flexible relationship with the concept of full, and now it was 1 a.m. in Vermont, and the car was telling him something important. He saw the blue highway service sign come up on the right and took the exit without hesitating. The ramp deposited him onto a 2-lane road that ran southeast, through farm country and forest, with the particular quietness of roads that have never been important enough to earn streetlights. He made it about a mile before the engine started coughing. The Jeep gave a few warning lurches, the kind of mechanical protest that translates roughly to, "I tried to tell you," and then coasted to a stop on the shoulder. Trevor sat for a moment in the sudden silence, the only sound being the cooling engine ticking and, somewhere in the dark tree line, the operational nighttime staff of crickets and frogs doing their thing. "Okay," he said to the car. "Fair enough." He called roadside assistance from his cell. The wait would be at least 25 minutes, possibly 35. He thanked the dispatcher, hung up, and stepped out to stretch. The night was gorgeous, objectively. A near-full moon had cleared the tree line and was throwing silver light across the road and the fields on either side. The Jeep's absence of a roof meant Trevor had an unobstructed view of the stars, more stars than he'd seen in months, maybe longer, the kind of sky that you forget exists when you spend too much time in places with electric lights. He walked a slow circle around the car, checked his phone, sent a few texts, found himself genuinely relaxed, leaning against the passenger door, looking up. Then something moved in the woods. Heavy footsteps. Not the quick skitter of a small animal, but the deliberate weighted sound of something large moving through underbrush. Trevor's relaxation recalibrated itself immediately. Bear country. He'd grown up in New England. He knew what bear country was, and this was very much it. He stepped away from the tree line, moving around to the other side of the Jeep. Stood there listening. The footsteps continued, then stopped. Then 2 sharp sounds like a clap, clean and deliberate. Trevor went still. Deer don't clap, bears don't clap. He had spent enough time outdoors to have a working catalog of the sounds that things make, and nothing in it made that noise. He waited. 3 claps this time, same rhythm, same deliberateness. "Hello?" he called. His voice came out steadier than he felt. "Somebody out there?" Silence. The clapping didn't resume. Trevor stood on the shoulder of the road for 2 full minutes, completely still, watching the edge of the forest. The moonlight was bright enough to show him the first few feet of tree trunks, the silver-gray bark of birches, the darker masses of firs behind them. Nothing moved. He got back in the jeep. He told himself it was a bird, some species that clapped its wings or communicated by striking something. He could think of at least 3 plausible candidates if he really tried. He turned his phone screen on for the company of its light and scrolled through nothing in particular. Footsteps again, closer now, coming toward the car from the tree line. Unhurried, steady, getting louder, then stopping. Trevor looked up from his phone and toward the tree line through the open top of the jeep. The moonlight lit the edge of the forest clearly, and there, at the edge of it, behind a birch tree, body concealed, only the head visible past the trunk, was a person, or something that had a person's shape. The head was still, completely still, in the way that people are not still when they are standing comfortably. It was the stillness of something holding itself in place. The moonlight hit the face at a flat angle, and the eyes— Trevor would describe this multiple times in the weeks after and always with the same word— the eyes were empty, not closed, not averted, open and aimed in his direction, but with an absence behind them that made the looking feel less like observation and more like something else, something he didn't have a clean word for. He locked the doors, a reflex, immediately followed by the realization that the roof was off, and the doors were largely symbolic. But the motion of locking them was something to do, some action that registered as protective even when protection was theoretical at best. He reached up and cranked the windows, both front windows, the only ones that moved, and turned off his headlights, dropping the world outside into moonlit shadow. He could still see the tree line. The figure had not moved. Trevor slid down in his seat below the door line, face turned toward the console. His breathing was careful and deliberate, the kind of controlled breathing that is its own, kind of prayer. Don't hear anything, don't hear footsteps, don't hear— A hand closed around his shoulder from behind, grabbed hard, through the open top, from the space behind the front seats where the soft-top frame had been. Trevor screamed, the full-throated, unself-conscious kind of scream that bypasses any concern for dignity. His hands came up instinctively. He twisted, and light flooded everything. Headlights coming from down the road, a truck engine loud and close, pulling up behind him on the shoulder. The hand released his shirt. By the time Trevor's eyes adjusted to the light, the space around the jeep was empty. The tree line showed nothing. No figure behind the birch tree, no movement anywhere. The truck door opened, and a big man in his 40s got out, wearing the faded polo and cargo pants of a roadside assistance company. He looked at Trevor with the patient, seen everything expression of a man who has retrieved stranded motorists from the side of roads for many years and has learned not to be surprised by their condition. "You the one who called?" he said. Trevor got out of the jeep on unsteady legs. He told the man what had happened, all of it, in the halting and breath-interrupted way of someone who is not yet fully caught up to what they just experienced. The technician listened. He didn't laugh, didn't dismiss it, didn't offer alternative explanations. He just listened, nodded occasionally, and when Trevor finished, he walked a slow circuit around the jeep with a flashlight, checking the shoulder and the area around it. He didn't say what he found or didn't find. He just said, "Let's get you filled up and back on the road." There was something steadying about his manner, a person completely at home in the late-night world of empty roads and broken-down vehicles, unrattled by it in a way that helped Trevor find his own footing again. They filled the tank, exchanged polite words, parted. Trevor drove the remaining 100 miles without stopping, without music, with both hands on the wheel. He made his sister's house at 3:40 a.m. and sat in the driveway for a few minutes before going inside. The hand through the open top, he can still feel it, the grip of it. Not a tapping, not an accidental brush, but a deliberate full-hand grip through the frame of the roof, from someone who had been there, in the dark, while he was ducked below the dash line, trying not to make a sound. He sold the Jeep that November, bought a car with a solid roof and automatic locks. He still takes long drives, still leaves late at night when the traffic is thin, but he has a dash cam now and a portable phone charger, and he stops for gas before the needle moves, and he does not, under any circumstances, pull off the road on a dark stretch of Vermont highway to wait alone in the quiet. Some lessons cost too much to need to learn twice. What the road keeps. There is a version of these stories that ends with explanations. The man in the field, a paranoid landowner, the fake checkpoint, a failed robbery, the figure in the Vermont woods, a hitchhiker or a local or a wandering person in distress. Any of these might be true. Probably some of them are. The world is mostly populated by ordinary things that look extraordinary at 1 a.m. when you're exhausted and alone, and your reptile brain is already halfway out of the car. But here is what's also true. Callie came out of that field with a wound on her head that someone gave her deliberately. Nora stood on a dark road with a man whose credentials did not exist. Trevor felt a hand grip his shoulder through the open roof of a car he had been told was isolated and unobserved. These are not ambiguous facts. These are things that happened. The American highway system spans roughly 4 million miles. If you laid every road in the country end to end, you could circle the equator more than 160 times. Most of those miles are safe. The overwhelming majority of trips taken on them arrive at their destination without incident, the only drama being traffic and construction and the occasional maddening stretch where the lane narrows without warning. But the scale of it, 4 million miles, also means that there are stretches of road that nobody has driven in days. Rest stops that see one vehicle a week. Exits that drop you onto county routes so minor that they don't appear on some mapping applications. Dark corridors through forest that exist, in practical terms, beyond the reach of help or oversight. Out there, the rules are different. Out there, the protections we take for granted, the neighbor who might notice, the passerby who might intervene, the camera that might record. These things don't apply. Out there, the only safeguard is you, your awareness, your instincts, your willingness to trust the small voice that says something is wrong before the large voice of rationality can explain it away. 3 things the people in these stories want you to know, having learned them the hard way. First, people in crops don't stand in maintenance paths at midnight watching you without a reason, and the reason is not a good one. Second, a real checkpoint has a real police vehicle with real markings driven there by a real officer who will show you their badge without being asked. If any of those elements are absent, you are allowed to keep your windows up and keep moving. The law is not going to punish you for it. Third, if you are stranded on a rural road at night and you have an open vehicle, you are more exposed than you feel. The moonlight is beautiful. The stars are extraordinary, but the night is not empty just because you can't see what's in it. It is full of things you cannot see. Stay on the highway if you can. Fill the tank before you need to. Tell someone where you're going. Keep a charged phone and a bright flashlight in the glove box. And if a small voice starts speaking in the back of your mind somewhere on a dark road, the one that has no vocabulary for what it's trying to tell you, only the feeling of wrong, 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 please, listen to it. because the road always knows what's out there, and sometimes it's trying to save your life.